section is called Historical Foundations. I want you to think for a minute, why is it important to learn from our past? When we look at where early childhood has come from and where it is, where we are now, there's a lot that we can learn. And we have some founding fathers and mothers of early childhood that have taught us a lot. When we look at how children have been treated in the past, children have been treated from going from being nothing to sometimes being everything. In the past, children have been treated like little adults, and if you look at pictures from probably about the 1800s or so, you see children that are dressed like little adults. They were expected to act like little adults, and you've heard the saying, children are to be seen and not heard. Children were shunned, put away, not welcomed into the company of adults. There was a time where children were seen as an economic value. The larger your family, the more children you had, the better off economically you could be, because those children could be hands that helped you work on your farm. So children were an economic value. Hopefully we don't see that nowadays. We see it in other countries, but in the United States, hopefully we don't see that. We see children as, some have seen children as being very innocent in the past, and then yet others still think children are born with big sin in their life. And that was part of kind of a religious movement of the 1800s. So we've come a long way since that time, almost to the other extreme. Children can do no wrong. And we know, those of you who work with children, that children have minds of their own, and they can do naughty things, and they can do good things too, just like us. So children have come a long way. When we look at our historical foundations, one of the main people that we learn about is Froebel. And Froebel was what we call the father of kindergarten. And he's called that because he was one of the first people that showed us how to educate children by taking them into the natural world. He would take them into his garden, and hence the word kindergarten, and teach them about play and about just things that were in the natural world. And children learned from that. We go on to see Maria Montessori. Maria Montessori was an Italian physician, and she worked with children who were institutionalized. At that time, if a child was misbehaving badly, their family could put them in an institution. And you can imagine being in an institution with other children that are behaving badly, the behavior just magnified. Maria Montessori believed these children were starved for learning. And so she took some of them out and she made a school for them, and she made everything child size for them, which was unheard of at the time. Child size chairs, child size interesting things to do, building blocks, puzzles, things that would inspire them to learn. And she found that these children were not insane or anything wrong with them. They were bored and they needed to learn. You too probably have children like that in your class that probably drive you insane. They behave badly, they tear things up, and oftentimes those children are just starved for something. They're starved for attention, they're starved for love, they're starved for lack of learning. Oftentimes they're very intelligent and they need to be stimulated. Patty Hill Smith is the leader of the nursery school movement, and she came along in about the 1950s, and she advocated for quality early childhood programming. Now, part of what came out of that was a study. The study is called a longitudinal study, and longitudinal just means long time study. It was a 40-year study. It's also called the Perry School Project. You can read about it in your textbook, but I want to tell you about it because I think it's pretty important. The Perry School Project went to Ypsilanti, Michigan, and they chose a selection of children from that community. They were two groups, and they made them as identical as they could. Socioeconomic status, ethnicity, religion, types of families they came from, that sort of thing. They tried to make them as identical as possible, and they divided the group in two. One group had no preschool, and the other one had a quality preschool program, much like the program that we see in today's Head Start program. Well, they took those children that were in the Head Start program and those children that were in no program, and they followed them all through their educational career, and they followed them all the way up until they were 40 years old. And what they found was that the children who attended the preschool program by far had better grades in school, had less special education, they had less issues with behavior, they had higher test scores, they had less retentions, holding them back in grades. They were more likely to graduate from high school. They were more likely to go on to college. And they were also more likely to not be in jail. And they also were more likely to own homes. And they made more money. Now, all of that to say is, when a child has a good start, it continues to follow them. And when a child doesn't have a good start, the child is forced to get caught up, and oftentimes they don't. And when children don't get caught up, they get behind and they fall into a rut, and the behavior problems happen, and you can see where it just goes downhill from there. This study is very important because it shows the importance of early childhood education, and it shows the importance of what you do as an early childhood educator. Oftentimes people think that working in a daycare that you are just a babysitter. You're going to see when you go throughout this course, there are so many things that you need to know, so many things that you already know, so many things that you already do. You're going to learn about why you do them, and you're going to do them better because you're not just a babysitter, you're an early childhood educator.